It is November 10, 1871, and American journalist Henry Morton Stanley arrives in the African village of Ujiji. His mission? To find the missing British explorer David Livingstone, who vanished 6 years ago without a trace. Many believe he has long since perished in the jungle. But Stanley is convinced that Livingstone is alive and waiting to be rescued. With a caravan of 200 men, he travels for 8 months deep into the African continent, hoping to return not only with an exclusive story, but also with the lost explorer himself. When the expedition reaches the village by Lake Tanganyika, they indeed find a lone white man. There is no doubt, it is David Livingstone. But the greatest surprise is yet to come. Although gravely ill, the explorer gratefully accepts medicine and supplies, but refuses to return home. According to him, his mission in Africa is far from over. David Livingstone was born in 1813 in the Scottish Highlands, in the village of Blantyre. Like all the boys in the area, at the age of 10, he started working at the local textile mill. His shifts lasted 14 hours, after which he still attended school. He enjoyed natural sciences, while his father guided him toward Christianity. By the age of 23, he had saved enough money to move to Glasgow and enroll at Anderson's University, where he studied medicine but also theology and Greek. At 25, he was accepted into the London Missionary Society, an organization dedicated to spreading Christianity in remote parts of the world. Initially, Livingstone considered traveling to China, but he ultimately chose Africa. In December 1840, along with other missionaries, he boarded a ship and set sail for the Cape of Good Hope, determined to preach about the Christian God to African tribes. Livingstone spends the next 16 years traveling across Africa. He learns local languages and quickly gains the trust of the locals thanks to his medical skills. In February 1844, he even takes part in defending the village of Mabotsa in present-day South Africa from lions. One attacks him when he lets his guard down, leaving him with a wounded arm. During his recovery, he is cared for by Mary Moffat, the daughter of a missionary who had been born and raised in Africa. They form a strong bond and marry within a year. Though his main mission is to spread Christianity, he manages to convert only one local, a man called Sechele, the chief of a Botswana tribe. Even that success is only partial. Sechele divorced 4 of his 5 wives and was baptized, but later had a child with one of his former wives and continued worshipping the god of rain. Livingstone, however, isn't overly concerned. His true passion is exploring the African jungle and mapping unknown regions. He becomes the first white man to see the massive waterfalls on the Zambesi River, which he names after Queen Victoria. At the same time, Livingstone becomes the first European to cross the entire southern part of Africa. When he returns home in 1856, the nation welcomes him as a hero who has shed new light on the dark continent. As soon as Livingstone returns to Britain, he is already thinking about his next adventure. In December, the Royal Geographical Society awards him a gold medal, but at the same time, the London Missionary Society rejects his proposal to establish new mission stations north of the Zambesi River. By then, he has been appointed as the Queen's Consul for the East African coast and independent inland districts. This allows him to secure funding for his next expedition directly from the British government. The mission's objective is clear: to explore the potential for British trade along the Zambesi River. Spanning 2,500 kilometers, the river connects the untamed heart of the continent with the coast and, in theory, could serve as a vital transport link between the jungle and civilization. This mission seems tailor-made for Livingstone. After all, his motto is Christianity, Commerce, Civilization. He is strongly opposed to slavery and believes that through a combination of these three elements, colonists can change their perception of indigenous tribes. In March 1858, the Livingstones leave 3 of their 4 children at home and set off for Africa once again, bringing their youngest son and a team of 6 British experts. Livingstone is full of hope, unaware that this time things will not go so smoothly. Tropical diseases, conflicts within the team, and Livingstone's stubbornness turn the entire mission into a living hell. In April 1862, his wife Mary dies of malaria in Mozambique. Yet even this loss does not slow him down. The expedition's doctor, John Kirk, writes of his behavior. "I have come to the conclusion that Dr. Livingstone is not in his right mind and is an extremely dangerous leader." Members of the team begin to abandon the expedition, but this does not stop Livingstone. He even declares that he is willing to go anywhere as long as it's forward. By 1864, even the British government realized that Livingstone had lost control, ordering him to end the mission immediately. His reception upon returning home is a stark contrast to 8 years earlier. He has no major discoveries to boast of, no one welcomes him, and the newspapers call his journey a colossal failure. Yet one thing remains unchanged. Livingstone is already thinking about his next expedition. In January 1866, David Livingstone sets out on his final African expedition. This time, his goal is to find the source of the Nile. Once again, part of his team abandons him. His supplies, including medicine, are stolen by local tribes, and by 1869, he becomes seriously ill. He suffers from cholera, develops ulcers on his feet, and contracts pneumonia. He survives only with the help of local Arabs, ironically slave traders. But in his condition, he has no choice. The events of July 15, 1871, hit him especially hard. In his weakened state, he witnesses his Arab caretakers massacre 400 Africans who had gathered at the market in Nyangwe, in what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Livingstone is devastated. He stays with the Arabs through the rainy season, but afterward, he has himself taken 300 miles away to the shores of Lake Tanganyika. After the long journey, he is so exhausted that he is merely waiting for death. Instead, in 1871, journalist Henry Morton Stanley appears and utters the now legendary words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" "Yes," the ailing Livingstone replies simply. He then describes his experiences, including the horrific massacre. Stanley will later include it in his book, How I Found Livingstone. When it's time to leave, Livingstone declares that his work in Africa is not yet finished. Strengthened by food and medicine, he bids farewell to the reporter and sets off once more in search of the source of the Nile. But he never reaches the source of Africa's greatest river. On May 1st, 1873, at the age of 60, he dies in the village of Chipundu, in present-day Zambia, from malaria and internal bleeding caused by dysentery. His local guides bury his heart beneath a tree at the place where he passed away, then embark on a 1,000 miles-long journey to the coastal town of Bagamoyo, in what is now Tanzania, carrying his body. There, a British ship takes custody of his remains. After 7 long years, Livingstone finally, at least symbolically, returns home. Dr. David Livingstone is now buried in Westminster Abbey in London, among the great figures of British history. Though his last 2 expeditions were unsuccessful, Stanley's report turned him into a hero. His legend was further reinforced by the fact that African locals were willing to carry his body for 63 days through the wild interior of the continent. During his expeditions, Livingstone discovered countless places previously unknown to the Western world. The rivers, lakes, and waterfalls he reached gradually filled in the blank spaces on the map of Africa. And perhaps most importantly, his deep respect for the local people and the continent itself helped shift, at least in part, the European perception of Africa, which had long been seen as a dark and unexplored land.